report. You'll see examples of the prompts and the responses as we get further into this. And a couple of specific use cases. One, generating that sample data. Two, generating an executive level status report. As you all, if you're all in the project management field, I can imagine that you're familiar with status reports in varying levels of detail. And so the example that I'm using here is to try to get the tool to generate an executive level status report, keeping the content at a high level. We do drill into some more specifics later on in the presentation. And then also I want to talk briefly about an example of how to literally take that content that comes out of the AI tool and automate the creation of a PowerPoint, because that's another medium. I'm using PowerPoint right here to present this content. A lot of times we'll end up presenting our status reports in a PowerPoint format. So I wanted to explore that a little bit, and then we'll get into some summary information about the tools, and then an opportunity for Q&A. But I will say we don't have to hold the questions until the end. If you have questions as we go, feel free to jump in and ask those, and we can make this interactive as much as necessary and try to answer your questions along the way. Just a little bit about this artificial intelligence proof of concept initiative. This is something that NK and his team at RefineM initiated to look for ways of using AI tools in various ways around the project management discipline. And there are other folks, I think some of them are on the call here today, that have also done some other proofs of concepts, and they're going to be, one of them already has done a webinar demonstrating their capabilities and their findings, and then some others will be coming later on. You can see the list here of the POC team here. NK's is our leader in this, and then Ada, myself, Kevin, Natalie, Navila, Nishant, Philip, Segun, and Srinivas are the current members of the team. And then the particular POCs that we've been focusing on is earned value management. And then mine is that I'm presenting today is the second one on the list here, status reporting. And then we have another underway for risk management. NK, do you want to add any further comments about the team here?
No, I think I just you have covered very well, Dennis. I just want to add here that anybody who is present here in this webinar, or if you know anybody else, if you have an idea or use case for use of GenAI in project management or Agile, and you want to make it real, then please connect with me and we can work it out how we can move forward like we have moved for these 3 use cases. I would like to have more and more use cases developed so that we can share with the other project managers, and everybody can utilize AI for their benefits. So that is all, Dennis, I wanted to add. This is an exciting field, this is an exciting time, and I'm thinking that we in project management can use AI for our benefit and our customers' benefit. So if you are interested, get in touch with me. Thank you. Dennis, you can proceed.
Thanks, NK. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in the IT industry for a number of years. NK and I worked together at a prior company. We really enjoyed working with him there. But I've just been involved in the IT industry for probably 3 decades now. In a lot of different business areas, I've been in a lot of different roles, from a developer to technology services to project manager to executive, and as well as working in different industries, supporting government clients and private sector clients, and both in a bit smaller organizations and some fairly large organizations. So that's a little bit about my background. I tend to focus on the strategic interest of an organization and make sure that any technology services that are being delivered really can meet the business needs of the organization, and focus on that strategic interest. But I also enjoy still keeping my hands, in kind of a hands-on fashion with technology and staying up to date with technology. And so that really has tied into my exposure and my interest in artificial intelligence. Some of the things that I'd worked on many years ago had kind of probability and statistics background, and focused on language learning models and so forth. And then when ChatGPT came out and really became widely known in the fall of 22. Soon after that, I logged in, created an account, began to see what it could do, and was very impressed at its capabilities. And so I've been really studying it and kind of focusing on it, using not only ChatGPT but other vendors' tools and language models and generative AI tools since then, to try to just understand what the capabilities are for these tools and how to apply them in our business areas. I want to get just a little bit of a sense from the audience here, as to y'all's capability. Obviously, you're all focused on project management, but maybe just raising your hand, through the tool here, through the webinar, folks that have any particular experience with AI, maybe just raise your hand. I want to get a sense of how many folks have already used some of these tools. So some of you have. Great. So some of you've got some experience with it already. Maybe perhaps some of you have not. But again, feel free to jump in as we go along here. So let me go ahead and jump into the heart of this exercise that we did. Again, it's using generative AI tools to focus on the automation of status reporting. And the steps that I used is, first, I wanted to collect information about the project. And to do that, like I mentioned earlier, I used the Anthropic Claude Sonnet generative AI model to generate data about a hypothetical project, and then took that data and uploaded that into a different model. And I intentionally wanted to isolate the two steps. I wanted to have one tool create the data and then a second tool to generate the status report. And then also wanted to just explore a different technique here, and that's using the OpenAI DALL-E 3 model to generate some graphics to be used with this example project, and we'll show some results from that as well. So this was the first step that I took. Again, this is in Anthropic, and I'm posting the query here and then the tool's response. And I'm not going to read through all this in detail. You'll see that in the slides I've got a fair amount of detail because I wanted to show you both the prompts that I used and then the feedback that came from the tool. But I'll just kind of summarize for you here, the input. I wanted to be fairly specific in the prompt, and I think that's one important thing for us to remember when we're working with AI tools is you need to be as specific as possible in providing input to the tool so that it can do a better job of giving you a response. And so the input here is I first define my role. I think that's also important. That's another step in providing context for the tool. So I tell the tool that I'm a project manager. I work for a software development company. I want to generate information about a hypothetical software development project. And so here, one thing to point out is I'm asking it to generate information about this hypothetical project. You've probably all heard and understand, some of the issues and concerns around AI tools and the concept of hallucinations. And sometimes when you're asking it for a response and asking it to give you information back, it can, quote, hallucinate and kind of make up information. And in many cases, that's not what you're seeking, and you have to be careful and catch that when it occurs. In this case, I'm specifically telling it that's okay. I'm specifically telling it that I want it to make up this hypothetical data. And then I provide other general parameters around the project to give it some boundaries, and to give it a fair amount of specifics on exactly what I want it to generate. And then you can see its response here. So it comes back and gives me this data, and it has made up these use cases: client intake and registration, case assignment for social workers, service planning, progress tracking, resource management, appointment scheduling, etc., reporting, mobile, etc. So you can see that it's gotten into a fair amount of detail and given me some general high-level use cases for this project that seem very appropriate, given the parameters that I gave as input. And then this is further feedback that it gave me. So it's giving me some specifics about the project, its total budget. It's breaking it down into these different areas. It's given me specifics around a schedule. You'll note, and I'm gonna occasionally here back up just so you can put this in perspective. Notice I told it that the project date parameters were January 1, 24 up to the current day with an estimated completion date of 12/31/24. And so you can see how it broke down that date range and showed me the requirements gathering phase, the development phase, integration and testing, and then user acceptance. And so it has come up with that further segmentation of the timeline within the parameters that I gave it. And now it's generated these key milestones. And so it's coming up with even more specific dates there. Then it generated risks about the project because I asked it to do that. I asked it to generate risk. You see right here, I asked it to generate risks related to the project, and so it's done that. It's generated the risk information. It then provided information about the technical architecture for the project with a lot of detail. If you're familiar with the technology here, you can see that it's gotten into some very specific information about the front end, the back end, the database architecture, network, hosting, etc. Then this is its response back to me. Would you like me to elaborate any more on these areas? And so then I did ask it to generate hypothetical details for the client because that was one of the areas that I wanted to kind of focus in on. I wanted to focus in not only on schedule and budget and risks, but I wanted to have sample data around the client with their backgrounds in case we wanted to delve into any of those specifics as we looked at implementing a status report for the project. And so it came up with this information, gave me a person's name, title, background on that person for the business sponsor, the product owner, the stakeholders, etc. Case workers, supervisors, administrative staff. And then it gets into details about the training plan and how the training, the activities within the training plan. UAT participants, and it's again coming up with these specifics here, a cross section of 20 end users from various roles. And so you can see where here it's now getting into not just providing me raw data, but I believe what it's doing here is it's really giving me value. It's giving me things to think about the if I'm going when the time comes and I'm ready to conduct my UAT. Well, you want to make sure that you're getting end users that come from various roles, for example, not all within one area of the department. And it's giving me details about how long the UAT period might be. And so if you can imagine, if I was beginning to develop this project from scratch, I would have to be thinking about all of those things. I would have to be thinking about my stakeholders and what their needs are, and thinking about putting together my schedule and how I was going to conduct UAT and who those participants were, etc. And so it's helping me think through those aspects of the project. I think we've got somebody in the audience who's got their speaker on. If you don't mind muting, thank you. And then client expectations, and it's given me some details about that. So now what I asked it to do was to generate additional details on risks associated with the project budget. And so you can see that I'm being fairly specific here. I'm honing in on a specific area. And you can imagine that you could then use a tool like this to focus in on whatever area you want to focus on. And for right now, I told it to focus on the concept of risks and specifically as it relates to budget. And so it's generating some detail here for my sample project about the risk of scope creep, the risk of underestimated complexity, and it's giving me verbiage around the specifics of that risk and the impact and also the mitigation steps. So it's interesting here that it's separating those out. I didn't tell it I told it to give me additional details on risks. I didn't tell it to tell me about the impact of the risk And I also didn't ask it to give me information about mitigation steps, but it has provided that on its own initiative, you might say, which I think is very, very helpful. Again, it just helps me to make sure that I'm thinking about all those different aspects. And then it continues on, providing a great amount of detail: resource cost fluctuations, technology licensing, data migration, cybersecurity, training overruns. So you can see it's getting into a lot of detail about potential risk areas. And again, this is all just kind of generating sample data for my project: regulatory compliance, infrastructure, delayed decision making, currency exchange rate fluctuations. So, would I have thought about this, currency exchange rate fluctuations? Perhaps not. So I like the idea that it's being very creative in putting out this kind of information for me for this sample project. And then contingency fund deletion. So that's the end of it generating information about the risks. Then I ask it to come up with a project name, and immediately, and again, this is the Claude Anthropic tool. It comes up with this project name for me, Project Compass, and you see how it's built an acronym around Comprehensive Online Management Platform for Agency Social Services. So again, I thought that was very creative, and then it explains why that name is relevant to this particular project. So then this is now getting into I've now switched over and used the ChatGPT tool. I want to show you how I moved the content from Anthropic into ChatGPT. So once it had created all of that content, I basically asked it to then summarize it all for me. And then I just took all of that content that it created that I was just showing you in the PowerPoint, and I put all of this into a text file. And so here is literally the content. Here are the details for the software development project. The project name is Project Compass, etc. The listing of the use cases, the budget, the personnel, the breakdown of the budget, this high-level schedule, milestones, risks, those details that it gave me about the technology architecture. This is the detail about the business users and sponsors. And then the training plan, the UAT participants, client expectations, and then the details about the risks that it gave us. And so the listing of all of that. And so this is the data that I have around this particular project. And then I took that data and put it into ChatGPT. And now I'm asking ChatGPT to use this raw data to generate a status report for me. But I want you to kind of follow my train of thought here. You can imagine that if your objective is in your day-to-day job to use an AI tool to generate a status report for you, you've got to give it information about your project. And so this is a simple way to do it, just collecting the data through whatever data sources you have that provide the summary information. And in this case, I've got quite a bit of varying detail here. Use cases, risks, client information, schedule, budget, and so forth. And so provided that data into the tool. Now, using ChatGPT and uploading that content, now I ask ChatGPT to generate, and here's my specific query here up in the top right corner, generate a one-page project status report for this project. The content should be suitable for a high-level view on a single PowerPoint slide. So you can see how I'm trying to be fairly specific in what I'm asking it to do. And then this is what it came back with. It gives me a project overview. It gives me the summary of the budget, of the schedule, of the current status. And you can tell how it already is using its language capabilities to put the raw data that I provided for it into a different kind of narrative form. And like, for example, this status statement: development is on track with core modules completed. Preparations are underway for the upcoming integration and testing phase. Well, that verbiage, in very human readable form, didn't exactly exist in the raw data that I gave it, but it's paraphrasing from that to give me a status. And so that's very, very helpful to help me come up with translating my project data into a status report. Now, I'll say, this is these topic areas, but then moving on to the next slide, this was also part of its initial response to me. When I asked it for a one-page slide, it didn't give me one-page content. It gave me this 2 pages worth of content. And so it's giving me this informational milestones, key risks, technical architecture, client stakeholders. All that's good. It's accurate information. It's the information being sent back to me that I had inputted. But I don't feel like, if I back up here, I don't feel like it fully met the objective of what I asked for it. I asked for a one-page slide, and it gave me data that really spanned 2 pages. So that's something to keep in mind. When you're working with a generative AI model, you might have to, like I said earlier, you want to be very specific in your prompt, but also what you get back in the first iteration might not be exactly what you're looking for. So you might need to interact with it and follow up with it. And so here you can see my next prompt. Please summarize the project status at a high level that will fit on one PowerPoint slide. So I'm kind of reiterating that point. And then it comes back and gives me this content: Project Compass status update, objective, overall status on track, budget. It summarized all this in a much tighter fashion: timeline, key milestones, next steps, major risks, project phases, stakeholder engagement. So now it has given me this content on a one-page slide. And you can see, just to kind of back up, where it now says overall status is on track. Before, here was my status. It had put it in this more verbose language here. And so because I asked it to, I kind of forced it to better summarize that, it has done that. Whereas the first time around, my schedule information was summarized like this by quarter. And then when I ask it to tighten up that summarization, then it just says timeline, here's a start date and an expected go live date. So it's now, I think, more successfully giving me what I'm looking for. If this was my objective, is this very high level summarization. But again, you can imagine how you might use this. Maybe you might want to go in the other direction. Maybe instead of less detail for a high level status, you might want more detail on any particular area. You might want it to add, to generate more detail on the budget or more detail on the risks. And so you could iteratively go in and ask for that and have it come back and give you that feedback. So here is one example of what I did want to kind of ask it to delve into. I asked it to provide a communications plan for the project, showing the communications activity, medium, audience, date sent, and status for the communications activity. And then I'm also giving it detail here, and this is a bit of a new step, to present the detail in a table format and concise enough to fit on one slide. And so if you recall back to this input data that I gave it, nothing in this project details really covered a communications plan. It covered lots of other different areas, but not a communications plan. So now I'm asking it to use its generative capabilities to help me build a communications plan for my project. And I like what it came back with. It comes back with a listing of activities, so project kickoff announcement, monthly project updates, quarterly review meetings, prototype demo invitation, beta release notification, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I could maybe come up with these items on my own if I'm the project manager and I need to build my communication plan. But I like the fact that a tool like this can help me think through those steps and help me think through the medium of communication that I would use. For which one of these steps should I use email? Which ones should be an in-person meeting? Which ones should be an online survey, et cetera? Who the audience should be for each one, and then what a suggested schedule could be for each one, and so forth. And so Now here too, I mentioned hallucinations earlier. Um, it is telling me that, some of these steps are completed, some of them are scheduled, and some of them are pending. So here it actually has begun to, you might say, hallucinate, make up some of this information because these specific details on these communication plan steps and the dates and their current status um, are not in the input data that I provided to it. So it's begun to hallucinate and make up some of this information. You always have to be on the lookout for that. You always have to just be careful and precise about what you're asking for, and then review the output that it's giving back to you, so that you can catch. Because in some cases, in some cases, I'm asking it. I ask it to create a communication plan, um, but it's kind of hallucinating and giving me the status of each of these steps. So again, I just want to kind of point that out. It's very important to be on the lookout for that. The next step that I thought about doing with the tool, and this is still within the ChatGPT environment, is to have the tool generate a project logo image for me. And now I'm kind of stepping out of the realm of, you might say, a language model. This is still a concept within generative AI. Generative AI is multimodal. The term you might use there is multimodal. Obviously, we use it for text-based information, but generative AI tools can also be used for vision, both in viewing an image and then analyzing and understanding that image. You can think of things like facial recognition and so forth, or self-driving cars. Those applications of generative AI are using either images or video to view them and then analyze the data that comes out of them. And then also these generative AI tools can be used to create images. And so you've seen probably people, use these tools to create artwork, to create short video clips and so forth. And so I wanted to use it to create an image, just a single image for this project. And you can see the input, the prompt that I gave it, tell it a little bit about the project name, and the project name that it created, that the Claude tool created, was Compass. And so now here ChatGPT is using that input, and it's created a concept of a file folder. I like that image because this is a record keeping system, a case management system. And so the concept of a file folder makes sense for this type of application. And a rough image of a compass here makes sense for, again, this project. But then with my first glance at this image, first glance, I kind of liked it, but then I realized, well, wait a minute, the north here is not at the top of the compass. It's not in the proper position for north. East is. The letter S for south and the letter W for west is not on here. So I kind of look at this image and I kind of like it, but I realize it's not really accurate. And so then I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to get it to improve on this image. So I'm going to show you, I'm kind of step through this fairly quickly, but I want to show you my experience in trying to get it to improve what this image looks like. So I came back and said, please adjust the letters that represent directions so that north, south, east, and west are in their proper orientation. And then this is what I got. It got far worse. Obviously, the letters are not in the proper orientation. Things are distorted here. Things are misplaced. So that was a failed second attempt. Then I tried one more time, the letter, and I'm trying to, again, be very specific. I'm trying to teach it what to do. N should be on the top. E should be on the right side. S on the bottom. W on the left side. And this is what I got, a third failed attempt. I tried a fourth time, and I get another failed attempt. It comes up with random information here. This SACE, was just kind of came from nowhere, inappropriate for the project that we're working on here. So then I'm kind of delving into why, whereas it was fairly successful, very successful, I think, in some of the text-based responses that it was giving me earlier. But then when I'm trying to get it to be very precise in this image, it's failing. So the attempt that I took was I'm kind of quizzing it now. to test your knowledge of spatial directions, please explain the concept and the directions of north, south, east, and west. So I'm kind of telling it to, forcing it to demonstrate to me that it really understands those concepts. And this is its response back. North, south, east, and west are the four primary cardinal directions used to navigate and describe spatial orientation on Earth. Okay, well, that's a very technical and accurate response. And all of this is the detail it came back with. Very much detail, very much telling me that it does understand the concept of north, south, east, and west. And then it even summarizes it here, saying that north is upwards, south is down, east is to the right, west is to the left. Now I'm feeling encouraged that I have asked it to give me more detail on its understanding, that now it perhaps will be better at generating an output that I'm looking for. And this is kind of an example of what some people have begun to do with generative AI tools, what you might call a chain of thought reasoning. There's debate out in the industry as to whether or not AI tools, to what extent can they help us plan? We're in the project management profession, and so a big part of what we do is plan. An aspect of planning is reasoning and evaluating different circumstances and different data input. And sometimes for the AI tool to help us in doing that, sometimes we're going to need to guide it along. We're going to need to get it to focus on what are the issues and the concepts and the criteria that it needs to be taking into consideration when it then is helping provide input back to us. And so I'm kind of demonstrating that situation here. I'm asking it to tell me that you understand, and I know that it really understands those concepts, but by having it focus on these concepts, reply it back to me, I'm hoping that this will give me better results. Well, here's the result I got. Um, I make this statement. That's correct. What I'm responding to there is it's what it had just stated back to me in text format. So I'm basically acknowledging that everything that it just replied back to me on that previous slide was correct. And then I say, now, given that you understand these directions, please try again to generate an image with the correct placement of those symbols. And then this is the output that I get. Another attempt, different from all the others, continued to fail, and just totally improper placement of the spatial orientation, etc. So I'm realizing that this just is not going to work. So what's the moral of that story, so to speak? You're not always going to get the output that you expect. You're not always going to get success in what you're seeking, and in particular, well, and I would just say too that um, while it's easy to see that those image responses were invalid, sometimes it's harder to validate text-based responses. You can look at that image and just in a half a second, you can realize that it's not appropriate, not what you were seeking. But for you to validate the text data that it's giving you, you're going to have to spend more time reading it carefully and making sure that it hasn't made mistakes in any of the text-based output that it's given you. So that's just kind of a lessons learned that I think we all should be very cautious of. Now, why did this happen in particular when we were focusing on this image representation? Is these generative AI tools do have sometimes difficulty in understanding the translation between the context of what they're talking about and then creating a visual representation of that. If you're just asking a generative AI tool to generate a random image and be creative, well, it can do that, and it can come up with some very interesting and creative images. But if you're trying to direct it and telling it to do something very specific, you're gonna get perhaps not what you're seeking. And when you try to ask it to give you some response, you're going to get almost always you're going to get differing output each time you ask. And so that's another very important thing to think about. If you've heard of the term stochastic reasoning, or that concept applies in generative AI tools. Stochastic just means variability. It means changing outputs. and that's inherent in the way the models are built, and like the transformer model that the AI tools, generative AI tools that we're using are built around. Um, it's kind of an imprecise art. You've heard of people talk about the fact that these AI models to some extent are like a black box. You can put input into them, you can get output. Sometimes the output is very good, but exactly what output you're going to get is not really predictable. Very much different than other types of software development that we do. Up until now, when you're developing software, we know pretty much exactly what we want to get out of that software. We create test cases where we work with great precision to monitor the output that we get. So the concept of using AI tools here is going to be different in that regard. Um, and also, just when it comes to spatial reasoning, reasoning is one thing, but spatial reasoning is a different thing. And I was kind of pushing its boundaries here and really seeing that I can't get it to accurately combine the concept of spatial output with the specific images that I was trying to get it to create. Um, so what are some of the implications of this for generative AI? One is that sometimes we might need to go beyond just the access to language models that we have through resources like Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT. Sometimes we might want to do fine tuning or might need to do fine tuning on these models. And that's a whole different step, but it is a capability that exists where you can create your own application and take your own customer data, use the underlying base generative AI model, but then fine tune its reasoning with your data. And I did kind of a rudimentary aspect of that when I uploaded that raw text file. That was me giving it some source data and then asking it to respond based on that. But it's possible to augment that in a much greater way. You can take a full database worth of information and tie that into a language model and then query that, and then you would start to get more output that is more fine-tuned, to your particular needs. The other thing I think that we have to think about is um, setting proper expectations. When we're using these tools, you're gonna see, I think, a lot of benefit from them, but you also have to manage your own expectations and manage your customers' expectations about the capabilities of AI models. They're not going to always be perfect. They're not going to always give you what you want. And then just the fact that you have to, use this in an iterative way. And sometimes you can kind of keep at it and keep querying and drive down into ultimately get the output that you're looking for, but you may not get it the first time around. The other thing that I just wanted to mention briefly here, I talked about PowerPoint presentations. And you saw when I was generating, entering a prompt, getting a query back from the language tool. Well, that's coming back to me in a browser window where I'm interacting with the tool, and then I've got to copy and paste the content out of that browser window and then manually drop it into PowerPoint. Well, that can be a tedious process in and of itself. And for us as project managers, and we want to automate the generation of our presentations, you want to find ways to automate the generation maybe of a PowerPoint. And so that's something that you can also use with the generative AI tools themselves. Y'all, I'm sure, have seen how people are using them to help program, and I've done quite a bit of that as well, using ChatGPT to generate Python scripts or to generate Excel macros. Well, you can also use any of these tools to generate VBA code directly, and then you put that VBA code in PowerPoint, and then have it automate the generation of a PowerPoint slide deck. And so we don't have time to kind of go through all the steps of that. So I'm not going to show you all the details, but this is just kind of a high level of the steps that you would take. You would go into PowerPoint. Well, first in your language tool, you'd create status report like I just did, if you're using the language tool to do that. Then you can use that language tool to create PowerPoint VBA code, just, narratively describe to it what you want it to do. And then it'll come back and give you that VBA code. And then you just have to plug the VBA code into PowerPoint. And so I'm going to open up another PowerPoint slide here just to show you that. I can actually maybe just put both of these on the screen side by side here for a second. And so all I did here is go into the development tab and enable this here, enable the development tab, enable macros, and then created a macro and then loaded the VBA code into it and then executed it. And then this is the output that I got. And so it generated this PowerPoint slide deck automatically for me using VBA code, using the source data that the language model created. So I didn't have to, create any of these PowerPoint slides, manually. It all was automatically created based on content that came out of the large language model. And so you can see this is how it summarized achievements, key milestones, issues and risks, budget status, upcoming tasks, etc. And so this is a great benefit and a very much an efficiency tool to help you automatically generate PowerPoint slide decks directly out of the language model. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed for you. Experiment with this some, and you'll see how it can really be a great benefit. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the main slide deck here. Mouse to go back over there. There it is. Losing my mouse here. Well. Okay, that was my problem. I needed to cancel out of that. There we go. So just to begin to kind of summarize this, these are some of the tools that I used here. I used ChatGPT. You can see a hyperlink to that particular location. And that was one of the things that I used. But there are lots of other capabilities within OpenAI's product platform. And I didn't use all of these, but I just wanted to mention some of these so that you can do some research with them as well. In particular, GPTs here. So OpenAI and all of the vendors are continuing to expand their capabilities in their products lineups daily and weekly. And some while ago, they implemented this ability to create what they call GPTs, which is where any individual or company can go in and use ChatGPT as a foundation and then create a product, so to speak, on top of it. It's kind of like think of it like your iPhone and the App Store on your iPhone, where you can create apps and then share them with other people. GPTs are kind of like that. You can go to OpenAI's website and see these GPTs that other people have created, and they can be around any area of specialization. And so in particular, if you search for project management, you'll find that people have created GPTs that are related to project management. And so you can go and explore them and kind of see how they can help you. And then, numerous other focal areas are created out there as well. You can also use the OpenAI tool to create an API and then use a custom application that you've developed to call the ChatGPT model and then build that into your application. And so there you're not interacting with it just through a prompt and response mode, but you can have a program that does some functionality, but then calls a model in the background and then gives you results from that. Also, these assistance APIs, kind of another variation of that. DALL-E 3, which I was showing you earlier related to that to the video images, is is a model from OpenAI, but you access it from within the ChatGPT interface. Um, and then Anthropic is another company, and their Claude tool was one of the ones that I used for the generation of the sample data. And then I didn't use this myself on this POC, but some of our other team members that are doing other POCs, they have used the Project Management Institute's Infinity AI model, which is fine-tuned and focused on project management discipline. Then they have used that for other aspects of generative AI functionality within the project management area, and then just numerous others. So this is by no means an exhaustive survey of all the AI tools out there. There are so many others from many different vendors, whether it's Microsoft or AWS or Google or X. Um, Hugging Face is another resource. Just so many different resources that are out there. And like I said, the industry is moving extremely fast. And but I encourage you to go out in there and do some further research and try some of these out. In summary, these AI tools or large language models, I think very much can assist project managers in various tasks. I think we can use them effectively for planning. I think we can use them to help automate the generation of status reports, drafting communications, and many other areas of the project management work that we do. But some cautionary notes here. The content does need to be reviewed and it needs to be validated. And so you very much have to focus on that and make sure that you obtain your organization's approval before you upload any company information into a vendor's LLM. You're putting data out there in the cloud, and when you're using that, you're going to be putting, if you use it, you're going to be putting your company's data in the cloud. And so you want to make sure that you talk with the privacy and security teams that are responsible for that, and go through whatever review and approval process they may have before you start putting any specific data that you have into an LLM. And I would think as a general rule, you would never want to upload PII data into an LLM. That's just not good practice at all. Now, what you can do is you can take these language models, the ones that are open source models, and actually download them and run them in your own environment. Some of them are smaller and can be run on a laptop. Others that are larger might need some kind of cloud infrastructure or on-prem infrastructure for running larger models. But in an open source model where you know that you have control over it and it's not publicly available, then that could be a scenario where you could build an application if it did need to manage PII data or other just sensitive company data, then you could do it in a secure way. But you just need to, very much be careful about how that's architected. And so then that prior slide was my verbiage, my summary of things to look out on and to understand about how the tools are used. I also wanted to kind of get the language models in its own words, notes about benefits and risks. And so this is how the language model responded with what are the benefits of using language models themselves and the risks associated. And so you can see the responses there, which I think are very good, very accurate responses. I'm not going to read through all these in detail, but I think this was a good feedback from the language model itself. And that's it as far as the presentation. I'll pause here and see if anyone has any questions or other ideas here.
Yes, we do have one from Sudhir in the chat. What was your thought process in using one GenAI tool for input and another tool for output? Also, why specifically Anthropic, Claude, and ChatGPT?
Right. Yeah. The reason that I used one for the input and the other for the output is I wanted to make sure that they were isolated. I really wanted to test that concept of passing, and I'll put this text file up here again. I wanted to test the concept of having one tool generate the data and there be complete isolation to the other tool that then was reading that data and generating the status output for a few reasons. One is I just wanted that segmentation. I didn't want any spillover from one to the other, but also the fact that when we put this into practice in our day-to-day use, we're going to have to input our project's content into a tool. And so I wanted it, to be in this kind of a format, not in the format of me having a dialogue from a prior chat, you know, prompt response, prompt response, prompt response. That's the way you interact, but you can also interact with an LLM by uploading a file. And so that's exactly what I did here. I just went to ChatGPT and attached this text file. And then that was the source of all of its content for the starting point. And then
also, I think the
yeah, go ahead,
other
NK.
reason not using the different tool, other reason that Dennis or none of us can use the real data for this POC from our projects because of confidentiality and things like that. So we wanted to create a project, and Dennis decided to use a different tool for creating a scenario or a use case, and so we can see how status report can be generated. If you are using it for your own purpose, you use your own data, but be careful, don't upload that data on the network.
Yeah, exactly.
What Dennis was talking about.
And I've used ChatGPT for a long time now, since it really, first kind of came out publicly probably a year and a half ago. So, and I've got the premium account for that, and so I kind of have what to me is almost unlimited access to ChatGPT. When you're using the public account, the free account, then you might run across the limitations, or it might say you've exceeded your quota for the day or for some 4-hour period. But I've got the premium account for ChatGPT. I then have also used Claude, but not as extensively. And I'll say that I've found kind of pros and cons to both of them. Mostly I use the two of them for coding. I'm doing some software development in Python that's AI related, and I've wanted to and I've seen great benefit from both of them. And at times where one seems to hit a roadblock and I'm not getting the output that I need from it, then I'll switch over to the other, and then vice versa. And so sometimes I've seen ChatGPT give me better responses than Anthropic, and sometimes vice versa. So that's the reason I chose the two of them here, just because I'm more familiar with them. I would expect that you could get good results from Google's Gemini or others, but I just haven't used them as much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? So one of the things that my experience has been, there are two aspects of this. One is knowing how to use GenAI, and there are a lot of resources. PMI has 3 courses. We have 1 course, and there are a lot of things on the net. There are a lot of local user groups trying to do. So that part is like learning about how to use it, for which you have many resources. But now actually implementing it in your environment, that's another hassle or another big challenge, because you cannot use something generic, and use it for expose your data to that what we were talking about. That's where is the kind of a challenge that you face, and how you overcome is one of the things that Dennis mentioned. Install those LLM in your environment. We are actually working on developing a couple of tools that you can install in your environment and in your container cloud, so that you don't have that kind of a security issue. So I think this is exciting time. There's a lot of things happening around, and what sometimes people say that AI will replace project managers, but I don't think so. I think AI will replace those project managers who don't use AI. So
Right.
So if you are a project manager equipped with UI, you are not going to be replaced. But the project managers who are not equipped with AI will be replaced by those who are equipped with AI. So I'll stop here. Any other question? We are at top of the hour. That's our time to finish the webinar. We'll have another webinar talking about risk management. We did one couple of weeks ago on earned value management. We have the recording for that on our YouTube. And we are going to do another one on risk management, probably in a couple of weeks. So I wait for that notification when it comes. But if you have any questions and you want to ask anything about GenAI, how to use in project management, you are more than welcome to contact any one of us.